समक्ष रखने की सामर्थ्य रखता है, उनको हम डॉक्टर आर बालासुब्रमण्यम के नाम से जान सकते हैं। मैं आपका मंच पर हार्दिक स्वागत करती हूँ उद्बोधन के लिए। डॉक्टर आर बालासुब्रमण्यम जी।
Namaskar, good evening. For a few seconds when Dr. Sarojji was talking about me, I was convinced that she's completely mistaken. But now that she's dangled the carrot of getting carried away by her introduction, I'll try my best to deliver at least some percentage of it. Pujya Swami Niteshwaranji, Dr. Sarojji, Sri Ramanji and all the extraordinary friends who form a great satsang here. After listening to Swami Jnananji expound on the 16th chapter, I was wondering what should I really focus on and speak. Thankfully, I am the second speaker. Swami Nikleshwaranji has to worry more now. You know, there's a very popular management book, became very popular in the 60s. It was actually titled In Search of Excellence. Around that time that I read that book, I also read an extraordinary book called Eternal Quest. And I used to wonder, from Paramahamsa Yogananji's book, Eternal Quest, which book should I follow? One side was enabling me to lead my Vyavaharik Jivan a little better. The other side didn't distinguish between Vyavahara and Adhyatma. It just wanted me to lead a better life. And trying to go deep into Eternal Quest, I thought there's a much deeper understanding of life itself. And it looked, there's a very famous saying in Kannada. I'll give the English meaning. I come from Karnataka, so we learn a lot of these proverbs in Kannada. It says a man lives on the banks of the river Kaveri, but only man can be stupid enough to go in search of a well for water after living on the banks of Kaveri. So my educational trajectory was very similar. Having lived on the banks of Kaveri in Bharat Mata's embrace, I had to travel around the world to acquire a little more knowledge on leadership, management and other things. Luckily, 10 or 12 years ago, it struck me that the West and their description of everything that man stands for, and if you can call leadership possibly the most practical expression of spirituality, I think India has got a lot to offer. And once that thought came into me, I thought, I need to go deeper. And so what I'm going to speak, unlike what Dr. Sarojji said, is not an attempt to, it's a very small attempt to try to live that, because it's an extraordinary effort. But an attempt to say, how do you practicalize the message of the Geeta? Or in Swami Vivekananda's language, he says practical Vedanta. How do we, it's practical only when you live it. Otherwise, there's no point in talking about it at all. So to me, excellence is an aspirational process. Acquiring these 26 values, 24 values that are there in the 16th chapter is aspirational. All of us aspire for it. But the practicality lies in knowing not just what to aspire for, but trying to say, how do I even get there? How do I get those qualities? How do I even understand how do I get it? And having got it, how do I figure it out? And its practical application. So I think there are three things which struck me when I started trying to understand the Bhagavad Gita. It's a continuous process for all of us. The first thing is, can we even relate to this Gita? I was just sitting back and watching, and I'm considered to be a very candid person. I don't know whether it's an asset or a liability sometimes. But consider what it may. I was just sitting there and watching. On one side, I was extremely impressed that 400, 500 children here grow up in the luxury of knowing what the Bhagavad Gita is. The other side, I was looking at the audience and wondering, if India is 80% of India is less than 40 years, why isn't this audience of 80% less than 40 years here too? What is missing in getting Gita to be related to by every human being in the world, not just India? Such a powerful expression of human existence. And the transition and the journey of a human existence to divinity itself. And why haven't we made that an aspirational product? We seem to make getting into IIT an aspirational product. We seem to getting selected in the UPSC. Now I sit as a member HR of the Government of India looking at the entire human resources of the government. And the single-minded aspiration, and I teach at IIT Delhi, most students come and ask me not how to live a life, but to ask me how do I crack the UPSC exam. So we have a nation which is civilizationally proud of itself today, which is rising again, can't inspire a generation of young people to explore something which is going to change the way not only we live, but would be a lesson for this world itself. I think it's time for us all to go deep into this. These kind of conferences and getting together is to ask these difficult questions. We may never find the answers right away, but the journey of asking those difficult questions is the lesson I learned from Gita. If Gita has taught me anything, it has taught me to be eternally living a life of self-doubt. That's the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita itself. Self-doubt is not driven by helplessness. Self-doubt is driven by humility and the ability to say, there will always be an answer in this book. Maybe I haven't looked deep enough. As I refine my antennas to understand the Gita better, the answer will come. That conviction also comes from the Bhagavad Gita. And I think these are all the values in the 16th chapter. If you just peel away the layers of the onion and just go beyond the semantics of the words that you see, that you will understand. So to me, the Gita makes excellence not an aspirational product, but an opportunity of a lifetime to make it a lived experience. And that is the beauty of the chapter. We can understand it in different ways. I have just tried to understand it my way. Considering it to be I'm going to speak from the angle of it being a leadership treatise and how the 16th chapter contributes to it. It gives us a very powerful toolkit. Now, I use it in the world of public administration. I would like to speak a few minutes about what I do and how the Gita is contextually relevant to me. The first thing I said was the relatedness and how young people should relate to it. It's a question all of us have to ask. The second is how relevant it is. If something is not relevant for me for everyday life, if something is not tasty enough for me to consume every day, it will just be a book I keep in the puja room, not have the transcript in my heart. Sorry for my throat. So the Gita not only gives me the relatedness to something which is extraordinary, also gets me to constantly challenge the relevance of the powerful ideas that are expounded. But more importantly, I think is the third point, which really struck and stood for me, is the applicability of what you learn and read from the Gita. He has been trying to overdosing me with everything to keep my throat functioning. That is the advantage of growing up in the lap of the Krishna Ashram. So it is one of those fascinating books which not only you can relate to, not only can you find relevance for your existence, but the moment you discover it, you can start applying it immediately. So that's something which stood out for me. I've never seen a single book, and I have traveled quite a distance in academic space, which can combine these powerful three contexts into one simple narrative. And the beauty of it is, it also leaves you with the powerful statement that Krishna gives Arjuna. You don't have to accept what I say. Try to live it. If it's not a lived experience for you, throw the book out of the window or something to that effect. So I don't think any other person To me, Gita is powerful not because it is the Bhagavad Gita and I come from India and it's a Hindu text. I don't even see it as a Hindu text. It's because it is one of those operational tools that to my life, all my university education was about acquiring competence. It is acquiring the ability to say, I know everything. Even today, when I grade my students, whichever university I teach, every student thinks he's an A plus student. And the moment you give him a B plus, you'll have a petition. Professor, I came to all your classes, I attended everything. Just imagine if Arjuna had gone with that attitude to Krishna. Poor Krishna wouldn't have been able to speak at all. But look at the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita. After narrating this whole treatise, Arjuna is allowed to choose what he wants to do. The power of choice and the freedom to dwell in that choice is not something that is trust and compliance demanded from your student. So to me, the Gita, what I learned was, it's not about teaching me how to operate from a zone of competence, but giving me the courage and conviction to learn to operate from zones of my incompetence. And that's the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita. It's very difficult to even comprehend and reconstruct what I said, but I'll try to explain it as I go along. So when I got this call to work in the Capacity Building Commission, it's a new commission set up by the Honorable Prime Minister, something extraordinarily visionary in its understanding. After his experiment of Mission Karma Yogi in Gujarat when he was the Chief Minister, and the lessons he learned from that, he recognized some very powerful inadequacies of the system. And he understood that those inadequacies cannot be fulfilled by mere training. Like by getting a person into a classroom or making him attend a conference like this, he's not going to change. There's something inherently strong in our DNA, in the scriptural wisdom of this country. If we cannot embed that in every single public servant, he is not going to really bring about the transformation that he sought for India. So what started off as his own personal journey and institutionalizing it into the system. And the numbers are not very big. We are only 20 million in the government of India and 20 more million in the states. In India, everything we're talking millions. And his mandate was very simple in its construct. And to me, it's the Gita which gave me the answers, and that's what I want to share here today. His simplicity was in 3 statements. And these are all 3 powerful lessons we can also draw from Krishna in the Gita. First thing he said was, हमारे अफसरों को ये सिखाना चाहिए कि वो कर्मचारी नहीं है, कर्मचारी से वो कर्मयोगी बनना चाहिए. And it's a very simple statement. You can say, okay, so what? Great deal, big deal. Karmachari is and you know something? Karmachari is a good enough thing. I take a salary, I deliver to my salary. What's wrong in that? If all our 20 million civil servants can deliver for the salary they take, India will be a great country by itself. But I think the Prime Minister was not satisfied with having a great country. He wanted to have the greatest country. And therefore, this transition from a Karmachari to a Karma Yogi, and that is 16th chapter in action, not the 3rd chapter. And I'll explain a little bit more. 3rd chapter lays the foundation for it. But it's a powerful experiment that the government of India is running. And the second mandate was looked even simpler, but possibly the toughest. He said, our people are used to use rules mostly as a barrier for citizens and hardly as a facilitator for citizens. Rules are necessary. They set boundaries. They set the context. Why do you think those qualities are described in 16th chapter? They are boundaries of how we function in society. The divine qualities are essentially tacitly qualities that everyone desires for, aspires for, but that's what maintains law and order in society if you look at it. You transcend it, it will collapse. And so he said, teach our people to move away from a rule-based approach to a role-based approach. And imagine the power of it. Arjuna in his role had to fulfill the dharma of a warrior. He had no choice. He could not think of the role of a cousin. He could not think of a role of an uncle or a friend. His only mandate was to think in the role of a person who is a Kshatriya designed to be a warrior on the battlefield and fight his battle. Again, it looks very simple, but look at the power for public administration. And the third mandate was even more practical, more difficult to connect it to the Gita, but if you go deep, you can. Was this self-doubt and eternal quest that I mentioned at the beginning itself. He said, we just have no idea to describe and understand the future of this country. COVID taught us that. COVID taught the whole world that. He said black swan events are normality now. It's no longer an exception. And in a world where that is a norm, there's no point, because there is no way you can teach or train the government officials to be ready for the future. Because the future itself is so unpredictable and uncertain. But what you can train them is to be in the mode of constant learning. And Dr. Saroj said it so beautifully, Swadhyaya. If you can imbibe that powerful attitude of self-learning and learning all the time, then you are essentially making yourself resilient and adaptive enough for facing the future. And this is also the message of the Gita, the zone of incompetence. Every time I try to understand the Bhagavad Gita a little differently, or try to understand Swami Vivekananda, I realize that the message is eternal. But our appreciation of that message is what alters. And it keeps improving or increasing or becoming better. So the journey of Karmachari to Karma Yogi is essentially what my mandate is for the 20 million civil servants of this country. And what does it really look like is something I want to talk. A government job is very easy. It's always looking at the outside. I was traveling here and Davalji was explaining to me the extraordinary road laid. How few years ago there was no road. Anilji was telling me how there was no water. Only a week ago the water came. So we always recognize the government for an external expression of its actions. And Swami Vivekananda says it so beautifully. He said spirituality is not appreciating the external. It is the opportunity to balance the inner evolution with the external. Because there has to be practical application, and nobody else could have said it better than Swami Vivekananda. He said, Atmano mokshartam jagat hitayach. And that's exactly what our public civil servants have to understand. They exist for jagat sitha, but that's not attractive. Merely telling somebody do public good is not attractive. Telling it, you can keep telling the 500 children or the 50,000 children or the 5 million children of this country, live the Bhagavad Gita's message. But that is not going to happen unless you dangle a carrot. So I keep telling people, asking public good to happen is not going to happen. But enabling and converting it to private gain, there's something privately gainful for me in the public good. It's a very simple secret. It sounds very selfish. It is not selfish. The private gain is the inner evolution. And the powerful expression of that inner evolution and societal gain is what one should aspire for. And it's the most practical thing for a civil servant. A civil servant is not here to attain moksha. But a civil servant is to enable society to proceed forward. And if he sees his attainment of moksha and that societal progress, what greater civil servant can we have? I think every human being's journey should be that. So we started off saying, again, this is something I learned from the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is not about learning how to work. A lot of people kept telling, it's about karma. How do you do karma? Absolutely right. What is the spirit behind karma? What I have understood, and I'm not saying this is the right understanding, so correct me, you can always be provoked into challenging me, but my appreciation is what I'm saying. It's not about learning to work, but it is about engaging the work to constantly learn. That is what I see as karma in Bhagavad Gita for me. And that is exactly what is, I believe, reason why nobody can master the treatise. Okay, it's a constant work in progress for every one of us. And if you look at the way it applies to civil servants, it is preparing them. So it's Bhagavad Gita is not about, to me the way I see it, it is not about becoming a karma yogi, but it is about practicing karma yoga. And there's a very big difference. Becoming a karma yogi is all about myself. You suddenly make the work about you. And I have to relate a personal experience of mine. At a very young age, inspired by Swami Vivekananda, I just went away into the forest. lived my life like a tribal amongst tribals for 25, 26 years with them, like them, the best years of my life in their huts. And I thought I'm doing Karma Yoga. What a beautiful hypnosis, self-hypnosis I had. Till my Guru was alive, things were reasonably okay. He would knock me on the head and tell me, you fool, it's just an opportunity, don't lose it. He passed in 90, and then it was all hell let loose. And after some time, it was not about I doing any social service or working with tribals. It was not about the social service getting done. It suddenly became about I being seen to be doing social service. And that seed comes in very cleverly without your knowledge. It's a seed which Vivekananda says so beautifully. It's a worm which will infest you without your knowledge. And until somebody else teaches you that, you'll never realize it. And that is when my introduction to the appreciation of what Karma Yoga meant came from these sentences of Swami Vivekananda. He says it so beautifully. He says, don't stand on a pedestal and say, here my poor man, take my 5 cents. Don't consider yourself extraordinary that you're here to help somebody. Consider yourself privileged that you've been given the opportunity to be an instrument of change for somebody else. And I think this is possibly the perfect definition of seva. And if the Prime Minister says our civil servants must get the seva bhav in them, I used to wonder, how do you get the seva bhav? Seva is not helping anybody. Helping is blasphemous. You want to say I'm helping somebody. But seva is that unconditional, non-transactional process where recognizing the divinity in the other, the Krishna in the other, you bow your head in the reverence and say, thank you for the opportunity of serving you. And I'm glad that you have given me this opportunity. It's a very, very, very difficult act to follow. I think it is those privileged few who recognize themselves, who raise above those petty considerations of I and mine, who can actually get up and say, it's not about me doing the work, it's about the work getting done. So it's not about I spreading the message of anything, but it's about the message getting spread. It's very easy semantics in English, but if you actually stay and think about it and reflect on it deeper, you'll appreciate that that is the Karma Yoga all about. So that is exactly the pathway to acquire these qualities. So something which gives you a practical approach, something that sets such an extraordinary, powerful, higher purpose, is what is the message I draw. And what did we do with all this? How do you want him to transition to Karma Yogi or perform Karma Yoga? So we looked around and said, how does one live the Bhagavad Gita in public services? In a world today we are seeing, right? We're all seeing all kinds of things. And then part of my life story has been I was 5 years the special investigator and vigilance director of Karnataka Lokayukta under Santosh Hegde. And both of us are part of Team Anna, thinking that corruption is the greatest evil. And once you solve it, India will change. We actually believed in it till others started not fighting corruption, but wanting to be seen to be fighting corruption. And then the battle got lost. Without getting into all that, what is it that we felt a civil servant should do if he has to live the Bhagavad Gita? How do you get him? And in a country where you talk anything, you are always accused of the danger of saffronizing. So we started looking at ourselves and said, let us define karma for a civil servant. What does work mean? What does a public service actually mean? And how does it look like? And so we started looking at the last 5 to 10 years of the highest political executive of the country. What does he speak? What are his speeches talking about? What are his Mann Ki Baats talking about? What are his tweets talking about? What does the civil servant feel? What does the citizens have? And we decided the 4 sankalps that you can draw out of both his message and the message of the Gita. It's very simple. And why do we prepare a person? How do we prepare him? I'll talk later. The practical application of what do you prepare him for? How does living the message of the Gita look like? And we said 4 simple things. First is Vikas. And development is not about the nation alone. It's not about the roads, the toilets, the drinking water, the airports. It is the inner development coupled with external development. It's Atmano Mokshartam with Jagathita. And we defined it and deconstructed it and said, if you want to transition from a karmachari to a karma yogi, This is how you express your opportunity for Vikas. This is how you worry about the last man down the street, the Antyodaya. You see him not as a recipient of your goods and services, but you see him as an instrument available for you to express yourself in the service of the other. So we begin with the duality of me and the other. A karmachari has to serve honestly. Everybody cannot become a karma yogi tomorrow. We are very clear about it. I am actually very practical. It's a journey for all of us. So you start off with the duality. I am here to serve you. That's a good beginning. And then the next W is the workplace. Society is possibly the greatest laboratory that we can find. Vivekananda said it's the greatest university, the greatest gymnasium you can exercise yourself. And we offer that carrot to the civil servant and say, how privileged you are. Divinity or whatever you call it has given you an opportunity to exercise free of cost in this gymnasium. We pay you for it. Sorry. So understanding the workplace, understanding the self and understanding the other and the relationship that binds us. That is what is Bhagavad Gita all about. It's a journey where you start off with the question of I and the other. But then karmachari is about understanding the work, understanding the workplace, and understanding the work person who's delivering it. The karmic, I'm not coming to karma yoga yet. The karmic who does it. So to me, transitioning from a karmachari to karma yogi is understanding that there is no difference between workplace and the work person itself. The extraordinarily powerful space of ekatvam, where you are one with the other and there is no separation at all. The greatest expression of Advaita is actually the karma yogi in action. It will take a long while for people to understand and live that. That's okay. But the journey itself is so beautiful for a civil servants that India will be one of the leading countries, possibly even much earlier than 2047, they start leading it. So how do you do? We said the Char Sankalps, the first is Vikas. The second we said is Garv. Garv not in yourself and your achievements, but Garv in what the country can offer us in terms of its civilizational wisdom, in terms of its scriptural knowledge, in terms of all that we can be proud about and not be ashamed about. There are a lot of negative things in our country also. Having the courage to discard them is also Garv, as much as having the courage to include them in our everyday existence. Decolonizing is not a slogan. It is a mentality which we have to throw away and take pride in what we have. You know, when I first started teaching, I used to teach a leadership course based on the Gita and Upanishads. An Indian university specifically told me you can't mention Bhagavad Gita as reading material. If that is Garv, you understand the nation we live in. And in a foreign university, they say it with pride. This professor talks from scriptural wisdom of India. And once they say, then we'll accept. So we have to change all that. We have to stand up and tell the world, why are you wasting your time in every part of the world with such conflicts? Look at the most powerful conflict that we have described and how to resolve it, and that is within each one of you. We can never stop any war outside if we can't stop the war inside. And that is itself a powerful message this nation can give to the world. And we have to learn that. So Garv is that. Third we say, is this country for too long has spoken about taking. Now Swami said it so beautifully, the guarantees. I think it's time to move away from a rights-based approach to a responsibility-based approach. The Bhagavad Gita is all about kartavya. What can I do, not what can I get? And so we said our Indian civil servants should understand Vikas as much as kartavya, as much as Garv. And finally, as a nation, for too long we have been saying, you Rajasthanis, you Kannadigas, you Tamilians. Unfortunately, our founding fathers divided us based on language, and we have taken it very seriously. Biharis can't live in Mumbai, Tamilians can't live in Karnataka, Kannadigas cannot live in some other place. Can we now say, if mankind is one, why separate it out? Ekta is that spirit of oneness, that spirit of interconnectedness that we can generate. And so we said, if you want to live the Gita and its message in the 16th chapter, you need to understand this. So we've gone one step ahead of the Gita and said you need 4 gunas. We've gone beyond 3 gunas. Because you have to be slightly better than Krishna. So first guna we said is Swadhyaya, similar to what you said. First, self-awareness, understand yourself. If Daniel Goleman can come all the way from Harvard or MIT and study Hinduism and meditation and write his thesis, PhD thesis about self-awareness, why are we sleeping over it? The most powerful expression of self-awareness is the Bhagavad Gita and its message. So just understanding who am I, why am I here, why am I born, the simple question that Ramana Maharshi asks us to ask, those existential questions which we have to wrestle with every day, every moment of time. That is exactly what the Bhagavad Gita in action is. It is not something you 4 slokas you read in the morning and go back home and sleep. You constantly ruminate, reflect, think about and ask myself, what does this sloka mean to a human being? How does it help him transcend from forgetting his humanness to extraordinarily getting into the divine space? And that's Svadhyaya is what we ask them to do. And we train them, and let me tell you, we have deconstructed each of this into practical trainable competencies. And if you can call it arrogance, so be it. I'm going to take a copyright on this and tell the whole country needs it, the whole world needs it, we'll give it to you free of cost, take it. The second guna we say, again, in the course of a conversation we spoke but we didn't use this word. I said, nobody can fight this battle alone. That is why India talks of satsang. Why do you need a group of people with positive vibrations? Why can't each of us travel our journeys alone? It's because by learning from each other, that relational learning we get in opportunities like this. As I was sitting there, I was writing notes of all the things that was getting spoken. There's so much already spoken today. There's so much of learning for all of us. So to me, Sahakaryata is an inescapable reality of existence. A Krishna and Arjuna have to travel together. Just imagine Krishna was alone, there's no Gita. If Arjuna was alone without Krishna also, there's no Gita. The masterly collaboration is why we have the Bhagavad Gita today. And to me, Sahakaryata is such an extraordinary, powerful message from the Bhagavad Gita. And the third, which is very practical, because you have to still fight the battle. You cannot just talk philosophy and say Swadhyaya, Sahakaryata and all that. You need a system, a process, a toolkit. And so we said that's what Krishna taught. Go fight your battles. You need the Chakravyuha design. You need to go start your morning war and close it in the evening. Take care of your wounded. Rules, regulations have to be set. You need order to be maintained. And that's a powerful message from Gita itself. And so we said Rajya Karma is something we have to teach our people. How do I run the government? What is statecraft? What are the policies that I need to learn? And you need to learn that too. And do your last guna that we said is Swadharma. And we said your dharma, if you transcend from saying my dharma is to be truthful to my salary I draw, it is karmachari. If you say my dharma is to serve the citizens without the spirit of separation, recognizing the divinity in him, that is citizen-centric governance and Janbhagidari the Prime Minister talks about. So these 4 gunas are essentially powerful gunas to deliver on the 4 sankalps. And every one of this is taken out from the Bhagavad Gita and its message. Between the several chapters, the distilled out message in a practical expressive form, which is not only for my Atman Moksha, but also for Jagat Sita. So to me, there's one more powerful message the Bhagavad Gita talks about. And the 16th chapter in particular. What is missing in today's world is our ability to manage our hungers. I don't want to call it as Daiva Gunas and Asura Gunas. That's one way of understanding. But in a world of practice, in a world of management, you try telling all that, they'll take it with a bag of salt. So try talking in the leadership language. Learning to manage our hungers is the simplest, the easiest. I was sitting this afternoon having a wonderful meal. And I was very strongly tempted with the second Rasgulla. And I was desperately trying to say, no, became so weak after some time. The Rasgulla fell on my plate, I polished it off. Now it's a very simple incident. But our hungers start that way, very simple. Let me sleep that extra 5 minutes in that morning. This one television show, let me watch it off, becomes a binge watch. This one little thing, let me complete it. Bhagavad Gita can wait. Tomorrow morning anyway is there. I can do my meditation tomorrow morning also. Every day comes. Now most of us fall into the trap and we think you need the Gita to tell us not to. But if you truly don't have the qualities, the discipline that the Gita demands of you, the ability to be detached from the consequence of what you do, the extraordinary Viveka Guna, the discernment that you need, the dispassionate approach to everything that exists around you, I think the Bhagavad Gita is just a piece of paper. If you want to truly make it a lived experience, my friends, I think more than the talking, the walking is what matters. Thank you.